Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So before we get started with this, I wanted to give a big thank you to you guys for showing support and understanding in the previous video. Like I said, going through a bit of a rough patch personally at this point in time, and the compassion that you guys showed because of that, it really does mean a lot to me. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, and I really appreciate you guys. But that being said, we are going to work on plumbing for the Supra today. So in these boxes here, we have a hodgepodge, an assortment of different fittings, and we have a hodgepodge of hose in this box here. So I don't have everything just yet, as this order shipped from 3 different warehouses and shipping is running a little bit behind for a handful of the hose ends and fittings and what have you. But with what we have here, we can at least make some progress to begin with the plumbing work on this car. So the first thing that I want to do is to build the dry sump scavenge lines. And those, again, will be the lines that come from the scavenge sections on the bottom of the pan to the scavenge ports on the bottom side of the pump. So these are all number 12s, and they'll be all 90-degree number 12 hose ends on, I guess, every one of the connections to the pump and the pan. So let me go ahead and I can get my hose ends out, which they are this bundle right here, number 12 90s. I will get 8 of those unbagged. I can thread them onto their respective fittings on the pump and the pan, and we can begin figuring out our lengths, cutting, assembling, so on and so forth. We ran into our first problem. So with the route that these hose ends need to take, we won't be able to run this ORB fitting here and have everything be copacetic here. You can see that there is no clearance for either this hose end here to this one, or this one to the hose end, so on and so forth. So what I may need to do is shorten this or figure out another method of routing for this guy right here. So not the best way to start this, as in order to modify the pan, I would have to pull the engine and pull the pan off, which I really don't want to do, but if it comes down to it, that's what I will have to do. So not the way I wanted to start, but it is what it is, and we have to keep moving along. So let me go ahead and I can get started on these 3 remaining lines, I guess, or the 3 rear scavenge lines, and we can address that front line at another point in time. And we have 3 out of the 4 scavenge lines done for the dry sump system. So like I said, this one is awfully tight here. I should have thought a little bit more about it when I was building the pan, but we are dealt with this tube length here. So in thinking about it more, I do not want to pull the engine, pull the pan and everything off. Worst case, I can remake this number 2 scavenge line, have it come on this side of the pump as opposed to the inside here, and I just have to remake one line as opposed to pulling the engine, pulling the pan, and what have you. So underneath, if you guys can see, that's what we're dealing with line-wise there, and actually pretty happy with it. So all things considered, and needing to deal with that or address that one line, not the end of the world, but I went ahead and I ordered a, it's something similar to one of these actually, where it's I think Vibrant calls it a tight radius forged 90. So these are, I think this is a 12 to 16, and this one's a 16 to 16. I ordered a 12 to 12, hoping that that radius is tight enough where I can make this work right here. But if not, at least I have a contingency plan at this point in time. So now that that is done, I suppose if we want to keep working on lines underneath, the next one to build would be the dry sump feed line. However, to do that, I need to pull the tank, and I'm going to replace this number 12 fitting here with a number 16. As if the pump wants a number 16 to feed it, I might as well give it a number 16 lines worth of oil to feed the pump and to keep it happy. So somewhere in my box here, oh, there it is. I bought this number 16 aluminum weld-on. So I'll need to pull that tank, take the powder coating off of it, cut the number 12 fitting off, and install the number 16. So don't really want to do that, but it needs to be done, so I may as well pull the tank out and get that portion of this project completed. And we now have our number 16 feed placed on the dry sump tank. And my welds are nowhere near as good as Peterson's, but I'm also not welding aluminum every day like this. So I can't give them enough props for the quality of their product. And while we have this apart, why don't we take a look at what a dry sump tank looks like on the inside for those of you who haven't seen one. So this is the inside without any of the guts in it. So obviously our number 16 bung goes to that tube that goes down to the bottom of the tank that will siphon from whatever oil volume is there. The other bung right here where my thumb is for a heating element. You know, Peterson sells a setup where you can have a I guess temperature probe or something along those lines that it will actually heat the oil prior to you running the engine. So that way you don't have to worry about the engine heating up to put heat in the oil. You can do it yourself in an auxiliary manner with that kit from Peterson. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it or not, but I at least have the option. So what goes on top of all of that stuff is this guy right here. And what this is a de-aeration baffle. So it sits, so the de-aeration baffle sits something like that inside of the tank. You can see down into the inside our feed tube there, and all of these assorted holes and perforations and what have you in it. The purpose of those are when oil comes through our port right here, you can see right there is the return port. The oil will slosh around the outside of the tank body here. And as it does that, it'll gradually make its way down, hitting all these perforations on this portion of the baffle as well as this one, working to pop any bubbles or anything like that that would be trapped in the oil. Now, air is not a lubricant, whereas oil is. So the way that one of these tanks functions, or how they effectively work, you pump in hot, potentially aerated oil through the top of the tank. It makes its way around the top of it, hitting the de-aeration baffles, going down to the reservoir in the bottom of the tank here. And what you get is cool de-aerated oil as opposed to the hot, potentially aerated oil coming into the top. You feed cool de-aerated oil into the engine, making the engine happier, promoting longevity, and helping the oiling system do its job. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, and I will go ahead, put this tank the rest of the way back together, and then I can go ahead, reinstall it, and we can start on that number 16 feed from the tank to the pump. Now with the tank reinstalled and fittings mocked up, it seems as though a 90 on the pump side and a 60 on the tank side are the ticket to making this line fit the way that I want it to. Now, I want it to obviously stay away from the subframe right here, and away from the frame rail, away from suspension components, steering components, so on and so forth. Anything that could be moving or that could cause abrasion to happen. So I think I have that pretty well sorted out there. Now I can pull, I guess I will pull the 90 off, as it'll be easier to hold the line out this way than if I were to attach the line to a 60-degree fitting and try to dangle it towards the engine. So I'll pull this fitting out, put it on the hose, then we can determine the length of this line, and we can get that portion knocked out. There is our oil feed from the tank to the pump. So next, or feed side rather, I will need to come from the top pressure side of the pump, and somehow that will need to make its way into the engine. However, I want to put the oil filter on the feed side so that way any oil that's making its way into the engine is filtered prior to going through the bearings, through the valve train, through everything that comes in contact with oil on the inside of the engine. I don't want sediment, I don't want any debris or anything like that making its way into the inside of the engine to decrease the lifespan of this engine. So I have somewhere over here, there it is, this old Powerhouse Racing remote filter adapter that I need to think about it a little bit more, but I may be able to make this work as the adapter connecting to the block itself, and as a good way for the pressurized oil off the top side of the dry sump pump to make its way through a filter and then back into the engine. So I just need to think about that a little bit more before I decide to pull the trigger on that setup. But we can go ahead and lower the car down now and knock out the last oil line that we're able to right this moment, I guess that time allots for today, and that will be the return line from the top of the scavenge side of the dry sump pump to the top or the return port on the tank itself. So I'll lower this down and we can get to figuring out what components are necessary for that line. On our return side here, a 60 off of the pump and a 90 going into the tank appear to be the match made in heaven that we were looking for with hose end angles for this side of the oiling system. So now that I know that those two hose ends are exactly what I'm looking for, I can pull, I guess we will pull the 90 off, put it on the hose, and that will give us a nice easy way to mark out where the hose needs to be cut for the number 16. We can do that. And then the oiling system, aside from the feed, pump to block, will be completed. There we have the scavenge return from the pump to the tank. It snakes nicely underneath of the throttle body and the intake manifold, clears everything. And can't get a good angle right now, but it does in fact clear the the frame rail right here rather. And everything is good to go on that front. So I did have to change the design a little bit. As you can see, my 60-degree fitting is right here, and that is in fact a 90-degree fitting, or hose end rather, off of the top of the pump. And once I strung the line in to mark where it needed to be cut, it in fact did not fit the way that I wanted it to with the 60-degree fitting. So I had to put a 90 on. Now I have that 60 that can be used hopefully for somewhere on the cooling system. If not, then I'll have to order another 90-degree fitting in, or hose end rather. Keep saying fitting instead of hose end, but I will have to order another 90-degree hose end. And I will have an extra 60-degree hose end that I can use on a project in the future. So all of that is good to go. Like I said, all the oiling stuff, at least on this side of the engine, is completed, aside from the one scavenge line and the feed line from the pump to the engine. But everything else is knocked out. And this ends up being a little bit of a time-consuming, arduous process to build all of these lines and to make them fit the way that you want to. But it's time that is well spent right now to make sure that the lines fit properly, they clear properly, that everything is harmonious with the way that it should be, and you don't cause yourself issues in the future. But that's going to be it for today. I'll come back in tomorrow and we can keep going with building with the line frenzy that we have just begun. Sorry for the heater noise, but we are back for day number 2 of running plumbing and plumbing components on the silver car. So after we finished filming yesterday, I went ahead and I tried to thread, I guess you can see some of the silver on the threads there. I tried to thread 2 of my number 16 ORB fittings into the radiator. And one of the problems that I've ran into with large diameter ORB bungs in the past is by the time that they are welded, they do warp and they move a little bit. And when you are attempting to thread a fitting like this into the bung, it does not work. So the reason that we have some of the silver and I guess a rolled thread there on the bottom is due to my own, oh, do you want to call it impatience or ignorance or negligence or whichever verbiage you'd like to use for it. I decided to try to force it on the bottom side. Thankfully, obviously did not get the fitting stuck, but it is not going to work right now without running a tap through those threads. So I went ahead, went on eBay, which if you don't know, eBay is actually it's a beautiful resource for getting odd taps and machining tools and things along those lines. So I was able to get, I believe it's a 1 5/16 12 tap, which is a pretty big tap, and that corresponds to the thread on a number 16 AN fitting. So this is the long way of saying fitting didn't fit in the bung post welding, and I bought a tap to remedy that problem. And I've actually gone on eBay a few times in the past to order taps like this, and in my bottom drawer here we move some of this around, something like this guy here, which obviously is massive, but this is for a number 20 bung. And I figured out this order of operations with the first radiator that I built for the silver car, that welding those bungs in is all well and good. And I love the principle of having an ORB or a threadable tapered section, as I've talked about in videos before, but you just have to do your due diligence and clean the threads up post welding. Otherwise you'll end up jamming the fitting into a place that it no longer fits and causing yourself all kinds of undue issues and grief. So I have that cap on the way. It will not be here today, unfortunately, but we can change up what I was planning on doing today and focus on the fuel system. So we have, if you remember from, I guess, when we went through and talked about all of the fittings and hoses and everything else, we have a sump in the rear of the car on the fuel cell that we have to run a number 12 line from that up here through a check valve and then up to the mechanical pump here. Then from the mechanical pump we will come down with a number 10 line that will split into 2 number 10 lines, and those lines will come and feed the backside of our 2 fuel rails. We will come through with 2 number 8 lines as a return that will then Y together again, and that will go back to the fuel cell in the rear of the car, and that will, or I guess the number 8s rather, will come up to the regulator. Then from the regulator, that number 8 line will make its way to the rear of the car, back to the fuel cell, and that will complete the fuel side of the plumbing. So the first thing that I need to do for this section of this project is raise the car up, swap my number 10 or number 12 to number 10 or the adapter fitting out on the bottom of the fuel cell, put my number 12 fitting in there, and determine the angle of hose end that is necessary to run the line around the side of the sump the way that I want it to. And from there we can make our way forward. So let me raise the car up and we can start going on that. And after swapping the fitting and the hose end out, I settled on a 150-degree hose end that puts me right at the angle that I want to be, to have a nice gradual bend with the line, carry it right along the bottom side of the cell and up over top of the subframe. And I'm not sure if you guys can see or not, but that hose end to this bumper support, or the bumper skin support rather, it is as close can be. Now, I'll take credit for it, even though it was completely unintentional for it to fit the way that it did, but I'll take it. So now we can go ahead, pull this 150-degree fitting or hose end off, thread it onto the end of our 20-foot section of number 12 line, and start figuring out the run that it will take from here. There we go. We have our 150-degree number 12 fitting, number 12 hose snaking along the bottom of the cell, up over the subframe, plenty clear from any rotating components. Comes out on this side, and as you see, I just have it mocked up with zip ties along these brake lines or fuel lines or whatever they are. I guess those are brake lines for the time being. Now up here, it terminates in a straight hose end, and this is where the check valve will be housed. So the check valve, think of it as a one-way valve. And you can see right here where my middle finger is, you can see the direction of flow. So if I blow through the valve this way, you can hear that my breath is allowed to be passed through. However, if I try to blow the other way, it doesn't allow anything to go back the opposing direction. So the purpose of this is, once the system is primed, meaning that there is fuel through the lines, or through the line rather, and up to the pump, this will disallow the fuel to make its way back to the tank or to drain out of the line, therefore eliminating or helping eliminate the possibility of starving the mechanical pump on startups and making it more difficult to restart the car with this fuel delivery system. So I'll go ahead and I will put this check valve in its home right there down near the frame rail, and from there we can go ahead and run our line from this terminating point currently up to its final terminating point, which will be the inlet of our pump up where my index finger is. We have the number 12 fuel feed all wrapped up. So I don't know if you guys can see too much from this angle, but if I get my hand down in here, right here is our feed line. I'm not sure if you can see the edge of the hose end, where my index finger is down there, but the line snakes its way along the bottom side. I had it shoot through the gap between the engine plate, the dry sump pump, and the dry sump pump bracket, as there's a nice little channel between the pump and the block that gives it a nice run to make its way from the firewall area up towards the front of the car. And from there, it snakes out around this way, and I can angle this 180-degree fitting a little bit if I need to, but it should stay perfectly clear of the timing belt and all of that, and it loops right up into the inlet side of the mechanical pump. So from here, we go from 12 and reduce down to number 10, and this number 10 line will snake back down along the bottom side yet again. However, it will have a Y block, which there's the number 8 Y block. Somewhere in here, there's a number 10. There's the number 10. So we have this number 10 Y block, so that way we're not feeding through one rail to the other rail. The feed off of the outlet side of the pump will go into this singular side of the Y block, and will split off to 2 individual number 10 lines that will come around to the back side and hook into our ORB fitting here, and there's a corresponding one on the lower fuel rail. So we'll knock that number 10 side of the system out next, and once we have that completed, we can move on to the number 8 return side, which will take the ports from the outlet side or the front side of our rails and take those over to the regulator, and then the regulator will go from here out to the back of the car again. So let's go ahead and knock the number 10 side out. All right, I ran into one little problem on the feed side, and that is the lower rail is too close to the firewall, or too long, however you want to look at it. So when I tried to thread my 90-degree hose end onto it, it hits the firewall and doesn't allow me to achieve the angle that I would like to make this match up and fit the way that I want it to. So I'll have to order another fitting for that. It'll be, I think I showed it earlier in the video, but something similar to one of these, which is a tight radius forged 90, I believe they call it. This one is a 16 to 16 or 12 to 16, I believe. One of those two, but the one that I need, it'll be a 10 ORB to number 10 hose end deal, and once I get that, I can thread it into the bottom rail and all will be good there. So fortunately I can't build that line right now. I'll need to order that fitting or take a run to go get it. Actually might take a Jegs run to go pick up a couple of the fittings that I need, provided they have them in stock, but that's no big deal. I can still go ahead, and I suppose I can work on the return side. Yeah, I can probably do that. So the return side will come number 8 here, number 8 here. Those will be 2 90s. The line will snake along, go to our Y block, and then we will tie into the regulator. So wish I could build the feed side of it, but that'll have to wait for another day. Can at least get the return side knocked out. Do that now. And we now have the return side of the fuel system completed in the engine bay, at least. We have a number 890 off of the top rail, a number 8180 off of the bottom rail. If you can see right down here, we have our Y block. From the Y block, we have a line that comes up to the pressure side of the regulator, and then the return side of the regulator is a 60-degree number 8 fitting, or hose end rather, and the line goes down underneath where we have the rest of our number 8 coil. And I got lucky on the feed side. I remembered that I had a 150-degree fitting, which, if you guys can see down here, right there is our 150-degree fitting, and there is clearance to the firewall with that. So I can actually go ahead and I can build the feed side as well, which makes me quite happy. I was worried that I would have to wait, order another fitting in hopes that it would work correctly, but that will work perfectly fine. And I guess while we have the car in this position, I'll go ahead, I'll build the feed side, and that will be wrapped up, and then we can raise the car up and continue with the return side. And just like that, we have our feed line from the pump down to our Y block right here, and our feed to the lower rail. It's a 45-degree fitting and a 150-degree fitting. The 45 I was able to source from my extra hose end, extra fitting box, hence why it always pays to keep one of those around. And the top is a straight hose end off the Y into a 90 to the rail. So the feed side is completed at this point, and now I can raise the car up, finish the return side, and I think we'll be about done for today. Now, I apologize for not filming a whole lot of this process. I have a pinched nerve or something going on my neck. I mean, right there is about as far as I can move my head up before my body physically stops me from going any farther. So not to make excuses or anything like that, but I'm feeling it, but I'm trying to power through and get this wrapped up. So let's get the car up in the air and run this return line to the back of the car. At that point, I think we will be wrapped up for today. After a day's worth of work, we have the vast majority of the plumbing work completed for the silver car. And I got that return from the regulator to the tank wrapped up. It isn't attached on the top of the cell right now, as even getting to that point was pretty much about all my neck and back could take right now. Don't get old, everybody. It isn't fun, but here's what we ended up with. So the cooling system still needs to be done, but like I said, I'm waiting on a tap to arrive so I can clean up the threads on the inlet and outlet or B-bungs for the radiator, and I need to do that in order to put the fittings in, to run the lines, so on and so forth. But aside from that and a couple of other hoses and maybe a change or two on the dry sump side of this, the plumbing is complete, and I'm really happy with how it came out. So a little overview here. You can see all of the lines for the mechanical pump here. You can see all the lines for the fuel rails and everything. All of the lines for the regulator and return side. You can see the dry sump return line here. And probably can't see very much else from the top side here. See if I can show you guys underneath. Oh, I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see, but you might be able to see some of the other dry sump lines there, and you can see the two fuel lines dangling down going towards the rear of the car. So I have a decent amount of materials left over from this, as evidenced by this box here, and some of these fittings will end up being used and other ones will end up becoming part of my excess hose and hose end and fitting stash, excess plumbing stash. But as I said in the video when I was deciding and determining what all I needed to order for this, it's very nice to have the ability to just order extras. If you are between, let's say you're looking at a hose end and you think, well, that could be either a straight, a 30, or a 45. To be able to just order all three of those options and then be able to make the decision based off of what you actually see in front of you, and to be able to determine empirically as opposed to in theory is a very, very nice thing. But All that being said, very happy with how this is coming out, and before long the plumbing will be completed, and then it will move on to wiring. And the wiring portion of the project, while I really did and do want to do it myself, with the things going on in my personal life, I am not going to be in the headspace to learn a new skill to that level at this point. So I'm very, very lucky where two of my very good friends have stepped up and are going to take care of the wiring portion of this project for me. So Bob and Sean, I can't thank you guys enough from the bottom of my heart. You guys are awesome, and you're making a very tough situation just that bit more bearable. And we'll be closer to getting this thing done, and at least we'll hopefully be able to hear it run in the not too distant future. But all of that aside, and completing the projects that we have today, still waiting on a few other hose ends and other materials for the rest of the plumbing. I'd like to thank my sponsor FedEx for disallowing us to make additional progress with this right now, but not going to complain too much as we made very good progress on this thing over the past couple of days. But that's going to be that's going to be the end for this video. So if you like what you see and you want to see more of it, and I know there's some of you guys that have stuck around for all of my rambling and to watch this thing come together, I very much appreciate you guys. But we'll be back on this thing very soon to knock out more portions of the project and to start really the wrap-up process. So until then, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.